one of the things that I would do is if there was somebody I really admired in the group, it's like, hey, what are you reading right now? Right? What book are you into, or what's the podcast you're listening to, or just kind of helping for little tidbits where there are things that, sure, you can take things away from a conversation, but if I can read the same book that I know somebody else just read and was able to implement some marketing strategies for, or help them kind of really shape their value proposition because of that, then that was something that helped quite a bit. There were times where, yeah, it was like I felt like, geez, I'm doing everything right. I'm doing what these people are talking about. I'm trying to, I'm putting it out there. I'm planting seeds. And that's the hard thing, is you've got to be patient. You've got to water that and nurture it and let it grow.
Welcome to the Rockstars Rocking podcast, powered by Voluntary Disruption, a show dedicated to people who are crushing their business and life goals. These are bite-sized conversations with leading rock stars in their respective industry who are pumped to share their story to help drive you to the next level. So, are you ready to rock? Speaking of rock stars, here's your host, Eric Silverman.
Hey, rock stars, welcome back to another episode of Rockstars Rocking, where you know it, I say it each and every week. We only have the finest, the boldest, the bravest rock stars rocking it out in their daily life, their business life. They're hitting everything at 100% and beyond. And this week is no different. Everybody help me welcome back to the show. Very few times I've had somebody back. So welcome back, my good friend, colleague, and partner, Mr. Chris Wolpert, founder and owner of Group Benefit Solutions out of the greater Tacoma, Washington area, or as I tell everybody, Seattle, because it's just easier. Seattle, right, Chris? What's up, buddy?
Yeah, what's up, Eric? Hey, glad to be back on here, and glad to connect with your audience here again.
Absolutely. And for the record, it's not Seattle, but how many times have I introduced you or talked about you and said Seattle? How many?
Pretty much every time that you do, but I do the same thing. I mean, look, I like to joke that we're up in Southeast Alaska. People forget about us here in the Pacific Northwest. So I just say Seattle because most people know, that's the big city nearby.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Well, listen, we're going to dig deep into a lot of stuff. I'm so excited to have you back. The last time you were on the show was episode 49 back in 2021. For those that haven't checked out that episode, I highly encourage it. It was one of my favorites. The name of that episode was Controlling Healthcare. And today we're going to go into controlling healthcare, but way deeper. And I want to start the episode by and I assume at this point everybody listening has already heard the great news, but huge props, kudos. I'm so proud of you, my friend. Congratulations. For those that don't know, Chris has been nominated as one of the top 5 Advisor of the Year finalists for the most prestigious benefit magazine in our industry, Benefits Pro magazine. Dude, I couldn't be more pumped for you. I'm so proud of you. I've seen you from the beginning when you started in the benefits side of the business, all the way through now. And I'm your biggest fan. So congrats, man.
Yes, thank you, Eric. Well, no, I appreciate it. It was very humbled to receive that nomination, and it's kind of one of these points, right, where you just go about your daily work and you do what you do day in and day out, and especially when you're running a benefits agency, it kind of feels like you're on your own island at a lot of times, and sometimes you don't kind of stop to smell the roses, right? And so I had that with this, is I kind of had to check myself and look back and say, wow, we have accomplished a lot, right? It's been 8 years now that GBS has been in business, has existed basically, and we've accomplished a whole lot in that time. And so, kudos to you as one of my go-to partners. And I could name a bunch of others. I won't do that right now, but there's a lot of people that helped me get to this point, and a lot of other people that definitely contributed to what some would call my success up to this point now.
So and we're going to touch on a lot of stuff. Everybody listening, I appreciate it. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, I apologize for my face. We're going to get to a lot. You have some really, really exciting things happening for this year. We're recording here in where are
Yep.
we? We're recording here in April 2024. But the biggest thing I want to start with, and we're going to come back to Benefits Pro top 5 finalists. But I want to dig into where that came from, how that came about, right? Again, we're not going to go into the detail of your history and how you got into the business. Anybody can check back and look at episode 49. But you're doing some really cool things right now. And one of the things that I think helped propel, in my opinion, help propel you to the level you're at now, right? We're not worthy. We're not worthy. That's an old people reference for anybody listening. If you don't know it, Google it, but I'm not going to explain. Um, you talked about a minute ago, you feel like you're on your own island oftentimes, right? And there are other advisors and brokers and people in the insurance and employee benefits world, even if they're not independent, folks that, maybe they're a producer and they feel that way. Um, can you talk a little bit about things that you did early on in your career that made it feel like you were part of a big company or a big group, that you were that you had the ability to collaborate? Talk about some things that you did, because you strategically and with purpose and proper intent, you went out of your way to find that collaboration in a very varying different ways.
Right. Yeah. Well, absolutely. Well, I learned early on. I mean, I grew up playing sports. I think a lot of people do, and I kind of gravitated more to team sports. And so I've always kind of had an appreciation for, having a larger team where you've got people that are playing certain roles, they're playing certain positions, right? And that's what I saw myself as, is I had to figure out very early on, what exactly is my position, and then how can I bring other teammates into the fold in order to achieve the goal, in order to grow the business, basically, right? And so one of the very first things that I did not long after I started GBS was I joined Nelson Griswold's Next Gen Mastermind program, and I looked at a bunch of different programs, and they're all great, and they all have kind of their own kind of bent and their own kind of perspective on how to grow an agency. But that was the thing that really I was attracted to about Nelson's program, the Next Gen program, was the fact that it was very much a collaborative group. It was very much, it seemed to me, at least for the outside looking in, that these were people that were all not just going to get knowledge and then take it back to their market and try to implement some strategies and things, but they were going there to connect with other people who were leading agencies, who owned agencies, and who were trying to grow their business. And I was pretty firmly in that category at the time, not feeling at the time I didn't know what I was doing, and wanting to be able to connect with people who I saw were peers, and were certainly further along in their careers than I was, certainly had larger books of business than I did. And so I wanted to learn from those who I wanted to emulate and who I wanted to imitate, basically. And so that's actually, well, I think you and I first connected, Eric, way back on LinkedIn. Surprise, surprise. But the very first time that we met was at Ascend, which was 2017, 2018, something like that. And anyways, and that was, and even at that time, I'd kind of started to assemble the Avengers, or the Justice League, around me, I guess, is one way to look at it. But I started to find people that I was able to work with, and that were going to be able to fill in some of the gaps where, being a one-man band, I wasn't able to continue to do so. And so that was a huge component. And so people can even go now, they can go check out my website. You'll see a lot of familiar faces from the industry on there. And it's because those are people I work with on a regular basis. And when a problem or a question or whatever comes up with one of our clients or one of our prospects, then it's very easy for me to say, hey, look, I need to introduce you to Eric Silverman. He's my partner. I need to introduce you to whoever else it is that's listed on the website there. But I just found that it makes it a lot easier when I do truly have partners. And as far as clients and prospects go, they don't really care if I've got the same domain listed on my email, or if they're in the same office as me, or they're across the country in Baltimore, right? Or Towson, right? But I always say Baltimore in your case, Eric. Anyway, so it's one of these things where they want the outcome, right? They want the result. That's what they're looking for. They don't necessarily care so much about how we go about getting it, as long as we're within, man's laws and God's laws, right? But that was really the reason for me to make that investment early in my career. When looking back now, I did not have any. I did not have the income to really justify doing all that traveling and in making that investment, but I did it anyways because it was painful, and I knew that I would be able to grow through putting myself outside of my comfort zone and exposing myself to people that were in a place where I wanted to be, as far as career wise and with their business and so on and so forth. So that was really kind of the big early key for me that really kind of propelled all this, quite frankly.
Do you think that the collaboration aided in your ability to not have what a lot of people, maybe you did have, but what a lot of people go through, imposter syndrome? Do you think that having the ability to collaborate with others helped, or do you think that actually hindered in some capacity because you were looking at other people's successes and trying to compare yourself, which can be lethal to a lot of salespeople?
Yeah, no, that's true. Well, I mean, I think in some ways it helped, in other ways it hurt. But here's what it did is, again, it got me out of my comfort zone, and it
Right.
forced me to work on myself and really up my game, right? So, I would one of the things that I would do is, if there was somebody I really admired in the group, it's like, hey, what are you reading right now? Right? What book are you into, or what's the podcast you're listening to, or just kind of helping for little tidbits where there are things that, sure, you can take things away from a conversation, but if I can read the same book that I know somebody else just read and was able to implement some marketing strategies for, or help them kind of really shape their value proposition because of that, then that was something that helped quite a bit. There were times where, yeah, it was like I felt like, geez, I'm doing everything right. I'm doing what these people are talking about. I'm trying to, I'm putting it out there. I'm planting seeds, and that's the hard thing, is you've got to be patient. You've got to water that and nurture it and let it grow, and then as it grows, you've got to prune it, right? So there's a number of factors, but yet there were times where I definitely was feeling that imposter syndrome. But then the other thing that did too was it led me to, it's like, look, if I'm going to talk to somebody about benefit admin systems and enrollments and this and that, I can kind of talk from a very high level up here about all those things. But then it was also like, hey, you know what I really need to do is I really just need to introduce you to my partner, Eric, and have him come in and basically Eric would say a lot of the same things. You would say a lot of the same things that I did, but then you'd have your own kind of twist on it. And because that was your area of expertise, I would tee you up for that. And I did that for people that are in compliance or stop loss, TPAs. I mean, whoever it is, I think a
Right.
lot of times what would happen, what I noticed, what I observed, is that there would be people in our industry, particularly, the brokers, the producers, that they wanted to kind of know it all, right? They wanted to know it all, and they wanted to be the one that would bring all of these solutions and be that single point of contact. But again, I took it from more of a team approach where I said, look, I'm gonna. This is what I do well, right? I'm the quarterback. I'm the central midfielder. I'm whatever. I'm the point guard, and I've got all these other people around me that I can pass the ball to, and let them do what they're best at. And so that was so yeah. But at times, yes, there were definitely times where I thought, gosh, I'm in way over my head. I've bit off more than I can chew, right? That old Frank Sinatra song, My Way. There were definitely moments where I felt that way. But again, you get out of your comfort zone and then you realize, okay, there's other people that have done this. And I just need to pick up the phone. Now that I have this network of contacts across the country, I just need to pick up the phone or send them an email and ask for advice, or better yet, even have them on a call with a client or a prospect, and again, help get the result that the client's looking for.
So let's look back, right? So 7, 8 years ago, whenever it was, 6 years ago, whatever the year was when you joined a peer group and spent a lot of time and certainly money that you may not have even really been able to have or justify at that point, maybe is a better way to look at it. I don't want to ask if you had regrets. That's not the question. The question is, I'm a listener listening to you today. You're literally a top 5 finalist at Advisor of the Year, Benefit Pro. There are thousands of advisors and brokers out there listening, and they would love to have the nomination you have right now. And they may have an imposter syndrome. They may have a lot of self-doubt. They may be doing some things and thinking to themselves, geez, I'm doing the same thing over and over again. It's the definition of insanity. I'm not getting anywhere. You mentioned earlier planting those seeds and watering and pruning over the years. The question is, do you and I'm not here to advocate for one group or another. There's a lot of great groups out there, but would you encourage somebody to look into either a local or a national peer group within the industry? Would that be something you would do again as far as getting a kickstart to your career, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, I would. I think, yes, I would definitely do that. I recommend that to everybody. I mean, even in fact, now I've got a coach that I work with. Our good friend, our good mutual friend, Ryan Miller, is somebody that I work with on a one-on-one basis. I think maybe that would be a good place to start. It's certainly a little more affordable than some of these groups are and things like that. But there's all kinds of things, or there's even things that are not necessarily benefits related. There's different groups that are, CEO or advisor peer groups and things like that in your local market that don't necessarily have to do with benefits. But so, yeah, I've participated in some of those as well. So I just think if you've got coaches and mentors and people that you're surrounding yourself with that are going to hold you accountable, and that are going to challenge you and that are going to help you move forward. Yes, it's an investment up front. There is some work that's involved. You certainly get out of your comfort zone, but that's where real personal growth happens, is when you're outside of your comfort zone and you're getting people to tell you, hey, you said on our last call that you were going to do this. Is that done? And if it's not, then again, you've got nobody but yourself to blame. And I think it also helps with that imposter syndrome, because as much as, yes, they're challenging you and certain things, they're also they're edifying you for all these little wins that you have along the way that you may not recognize, or you may not think it's that big of a deal, or you're just so busy that it's like, okay, I achieved, I finished that. Now it's time to move on to this next thing without taking any time to kind of pat yourself on the back or celebrate it or what have you. So yeah, I think, I'd still do that. Participate now in groups, and then also participate in individual coaching. And I think that is something that is, it's worth the investment. And even if I'll say this, because a lot of times I think that most people that are owners of businesses get that. And again, I think every business owner in this day and age can feel lonely at times. And so to have that as a business owner is great. But here's where I'm going with this, is I think that even if you're a W-2 producer and you're working for somebody else and your job is just solely to go chase business and consulting agreements and BORs and whatever else, I think that you need to make that investment too. And I think it's hard sometimes to make that shift in your mentality, that we all have to go through. I was a W-2 employee at one point, and making that leap into, okay, now I'm a business owner. I need to look at this not as a job, but as a career. I think if you have that shift in your mentality as a W-2 producer, that you're going to really set yourself apart amongst your peers within your own firm, or certainly within your own marketplace. And so it's certainly not impossible. And you have to take action. At some point, you can get all the knowledge and information you want. At some point, you do have to do something about it, and that's on you. Nobody can do it for you.
I wanted, there's so much I want to unpack here. You got so many great things coming up and going on, that is obviously, for anybody listening, you're going to understand and see clearly how and why Chris is up for this prestigious industry-wide award. But one of the things, I mean, it all starts, it all culminates. So You were part of a big collaborative book years ago. I'm holding it up right here, Next Generation Healthcare. I know that was a launch, not the launching pad, but one of many launching pads that helped you get clients and prospects and get your own personal brand going. For those on YouTube, you'll see I'm holding the book up. You can get a copy from his website. You can order it on Amazon as a bestseller. It's incredible. But what I really am excited about now is how that led to a documentary that you're part of. So for those that haven't already heard or seen, there's a industry-wide collaborative documentary that's happening. And frankly, by the time this episode here, Chris, is released, I believe the documentary may be out or nearly out. And the name of the documentary, if you haven't already heard about it, check it out. It's not personal, it's just healthcare. So it's certainly an adaptation of the whole, it's not personal, it's just business. And in their marketing is brilliant. They cross out the word business and write the word healthcare. So it's not personal, it's just healthcare. Chris, not many people can say they're part of a national documentary. And frankly, I don't know if it's set yet. I have no clue. If you know, you're welcome to give me the exclusive. But I know the goal is to try to get this documentary into a Hulu, Netflix, Amazon type place at some point in the future. Talk to everybody about the documentary in general, what you've done, your part in it with respect to being interviewed and talking about your side of the healthcare industry.
Yeah, so there was so I am a producer on that project. As you know, I guess in the film industry, you'd call it producer. So not in the sense that I'm an insurance producer, different kind of producer. But anyhow, yeah. So there were several of us that decided to do this project. I'd actually heard about it years ago at one of our mastermind events. Somebody had mentioned something in passing about, well, actually, our executive director, Bart Camerata, was the one that had said something to me about it. You know, when we're at one of these happy hours, having a couple cocktails, and I'm like, hey, man, whenever you do that, I want to be part of it, right? And I remember saying that to him. And again, this was probably 5 or 6 years ago now, right? And well, the day finally came, and you know, and as soon as we talked about it, I'm like, I don't even care. I'm in. Like, let's do this. And so there were several of us. We got
You
on
are
a phone
famous
call.
for just giving your credit card to anybody, but that's a whole nother story. Go ahead.
Right, exactly. Even when it's already maxed out. No, I'm just kidding. So Bart called me last summer and said, okay, we're doing this. And I of course said I'm in almost immediately. And so we had a few calls with him and the rest of the production team, and just kind of gave them ideas on who to interview, what to ask, what to talk about. And Bart's been around our industry. I mean, obviously he does videography, but he's been around our industry for several years now, having done a lot of work for Nelson and Scott at the time. And so it was one of these things where we didn't want to make it, we did not want to make this an advertisement for the next gen, modernized healthcare plan building type of thing, right? That was not the idea behind this. Was really to really dive deep on pointing out the problems systemically with the healthcare system, and really pointing to that. I mean, the title says it, but pointing to the fact that healthcare is a business, right or wrong. I know there's nonprofits involved and all these kinds of things, but at the end of the day, it is a business. And that is how it was set up decades ago. And so we want to shine a light on that, but we also want to shine a light on some of the solutions. And so there's a little bit of everything in there. You're gonna, you're gonna get mad, you're gonna get sad, you're probably gonna cry at some point, you're gonna laugh, you're going to experience a spectrum of emotions, but you're also going to learn a lot. There's a lot that we have in there, and we really leaned on subject matter experts in a lot of different areas of the industry, and leverage their expertise, and their knowledge about what they see from their perspective, whether it's from the nursing side, having Nurse Deb involved there, Deb Alt, having Renzo from USRX Care be interviewed about PBMs, having Lester on there talking about his own experience with his parents and his own experience with him personally having a surgery, and a number of others. So
Sure.
it really, I think, is it's going to turn out to be something that I think that is going to be what we intended for it to be, which again is not an advertisement or a commercial for us or what we do, but really shining a light on the problem and the solutions that exist. And yeah, so we're very excited to launch it. The first initial launch, the first probably 60 or 90 days, it is going to be available for each of the individual producers are going to be doing screenings in their hometown. So I'm going to have a screening or two up here in the greater Seattle area, and others that are involved will be doing screenings in their town as well. So the first 90 days, it's exclusively going to be involved there, because as much as I just said, it's not an advertisement for us, it certainly is a marketing opportunity for us as well. And we all invested in this. And so we want to make a big event out of it, have people come out and check it out, and, walk the red carpet and, do the Hollywood thing, I guess. And then after that, it is going to be available on other platforms. I am not at liberty to tell you which ones at this point, but it is going to be available for wider consumption by the middle or certainly the end of summer.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I didn't know any of that. So you said it's not an advertisement, it's not, but what I think it is, and this is great, is it is an advertisement to make the public aware further and deeper of what's going on, and that there are ways to fix it and control it and make healthcare as a broad statement a predictable and forecastable expense that can be managed and can be controlled like any other line item budget that any CFO would be responsible and in charge of forecasting and analyzing and predicting. So in that respect, I think it is, and that's a good thing that it's an advertisement for there is a better way. So when it comes to the documentary, what have you and again, you've been on the inside, you're a producer of it within it. Have you learned anything? Maybe have you gleaned anything that you've been able to use that maybe you could share with others that maybe you already knew it, but you weren't digging deep on? You didn't have your thumb pressed on it, and it's a way that others, including yourself, could use for prospecting and better educating the public.
Yeah, I've learned from just from watching Renzo and listening to him talk about PBMs and drug manufacturing and all these kinds of things. I mean, that stuff is it's kind of Greek to me, right? That is an area that I don't feel particularly strong in overall as it relates to self-funding healthcare plans and so on and so forth. Again, that's an area that I lean on others for their expertise. And just him highlighting certain things within contracts where it's like, I read this and it's Greek to me. Well, and then he reads it and he's like, it's Greek to me as well, but they do this deliberately, right? This is why they write the contracts this way, is so that they can confuse you and so that they can just easily change things to meet their guarantees or whatever the case is, so that they can say, no, we fulfilled what we told you we were going to do. So that was really eye-opening to see his piece of that, and that's I learned a ton about that. But then the thing that I think is interesting, and the audience will see this when you do have a chance to watch this documentary, is I had a chance to go to Columbus, Ohio. I went to AIMS headquarters and visited Nurse Deb and her staff. And they actually have some of the recordings between their nurse staff and some of these different doctors and facilities and things like that. And I'll tell you, the thing that was most kind of eye-opening or gut-wrenching for me was listening to how flippant some of these doctors were about the cost of medications, the cost of treatments, of this and that, and just how they were so unwilling to have any sort of conversation or negotiation or have any other consideration other than what they had already prescribed or what they had already diagnosed or so on and so forth. And it just kind of leads you it led me to remember, and I learned this lesson all the time from dealing in healthcare, but that doctors are human, right? They're not perfect. They don't know everything. And the thing that what was most eye-opening and gut-wrenching, I guess, is that there was that unwillingness to look at themselves in the mirror and think, perhaps I'm wrong here, right? Or perhaps I don't have all the information, or maybe that there's something else here that I'm unaware of, or whatever the case is. So that was another thing that you'll see in the documentary, where it's like, well, if this guy doesn't get this medication, he's going to be dead. And they're talking about this medication that should cost somewhere around $7,000, and they're charging 75,000, right? It's like, well, if he doesn't get the medication, he's going to be dead. And it's like, all right, well, he's going to be poor, bankrupt, not going to have any money, but he's going to be alive. Like, it's just that was one thing that really surprised me, because I've heard a lot of her stories over the years, but to actually hear it on a recording, that she's playing in her office, it's like, okay, wow, it's worse than I thought, and I thought it was pretty bad to begin with.
Good Lord. That's crazy. And the doctors who have that God complex, they don't know, or they say they don't know. They don't tend to really care about the cost. They're just like, well, look, this is the answer. Do it or don't. He's alive or he's not. But we see it on our side with employers and their employees, where yeah, maybe they do or don't have that medication, but if they do, they're not going to be able to afford anything else. And that's tragic,
Yeah, it shouldn't be that way.
Um, is there, before I want to move on, because you got more going on, as if you haven't already been doing enough. Before I move on, though, is there anything else, any parting shot with respect to the documentary that you want to have our listeners consider with respect to whether or not they should watch it and what they could be doing? And remember, obviously, everybody listening is going to be in our industry anyway.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, go watch it. First of all, I think you'll probably have the same thoughts I did, but it's a lot of it's a lot of people that are within our industry and on the healthcare side and on the legislation and compliance side and things like that we're talking to in this documentary. So I think you'll see a lot of familiar faces in watching it. And the runtime is going to be about 60 minutes. So it's not going to
I actually
be.
thought it was going to be longer.
Yeah, no. So it's not going to be super long. It's going to be very digestible, and no, I think everybody should watch it. I think it should be. I think everybody should watch it. I mean, obviously, I guess I'm a little biased in this case, but having participated in helping fund the project, but check it out. If you can go to one of the screenings, I would certainly suggest that. But if not, then again, we are going to be making it available for wider consumption, and hopefully you'll have a chance to see it one way or another.
And yeah, I mean, anybody listening, there's a lot of producers all over the country, so there's gonna be screenings everywhere, or all over, I should say. And when you say screenings, dare I ask, does that mean we all bring our own popcorn and go to your backyard or sit in your living room, or are folks trying to talk to movie theaters? Like, is there any? Can you give us a sense of that?
Yeah, so I don't know what other people are doing. I'm not having people come to my house, but I
Come on,
suppose I
man, I was
could.
gonna come over.
Yeah, all right. I suppose I could do that too. But no, I've been looking into theaters and other venues where we can have a screening and then have some kind of reception afterwards, where people can have
Nice.
cocktails and hang out and talk about how great it was, hopefully.
That's
But
awesome. And of course, get your
yeah,
autograph. Don't forget.
yeah. Well, yeah, that too. Right, naturally.
All right, well, let's well, we're not really switching gears, but let's move into a different type of medium. So you wrote a book, you're part of this huge documentary. And for those that have yet to listen to episode 49, Controlling Healthcare, starring the one, the only Chris Wolpert, shameless plug. If you haven't gone back and you're not going to, that's fair. But Chris was also decided to get really creative back in the day. And when I say back in the day, I mean a few years ago, 2021, you released volume 1 of Hit Zero. Hit Zero, if you're not watching on YouTube, yeah, I'm holding up a comic book. Chris Wolpert, this guy right here, he turned himself into a comic book superhero. and he is known as the Wolpertinger. Hit Zero: The Quest to Make Healthcare a Controllable Expense. And this was, I mean, to this day, it's still I talk about it. It's the most creative way to get a book out there in public consumption with respect to marketing and talking about how there is a way to control and change healthcare. I always wondered if there was going to be a volume two, and sure as heck, there is. You're working on it right now. I
Yep.
don't want you to give away all the secrets, but volume two, I believe it's Voyage of the Contrarian, is going to be coming out at some point in the year 2024. And you know what I find really cool is that you mentioned earlier that you like to align yourself with the Avengers or the Justice League. So that comic book theme is just a part of who you are, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and it really, yeah, I mean, it really speaks to what we've already talked about quite a bit about being part of a team and having a guide and so on and so forth. One thing I do have to correct you on is that the Wolpertinger, that character, is first of all, it's based on an actual like mythological thing from Bavaria in Germany, from years ago. So look it up online. It's kind of interesting. And I found that by accident by somebody on LinkedIn who had mentioned it to me, and I was trying to figure out who the guide character was going to be, and it is the Wolpertinger, right? So that's what they're expecting to see. What Eric's showing on the screen right now, which is this big, scary looking
Kind of looks
Wolpertinger,
like.
kind of like a jackalope, right? Where you've got a bunny that has antlers. The Wolpertinger is a bunny with antlers, but also has owl wings and has these sharp fangs and has these glowing red eyes. And this again, this is I'm not making any of that up. That's all taken from the forests of Bavaria from years and years ago. And but it just so perfectly fits with my last name. I thought, all right, well, here it is. And then of course the kind of the shadow character. So if I'm the guide, the shadow character is the jackalopes that represent kind of the, I don't know what you want to call them, the status quo brokers, I guess, just for a lack of a better term, or the buka brokers. Um, and the heroes of this story, this was where I'm correcting you, Eric, is that the heroes of this story are actually Gage and Gwen, who are the CFO and the HR director of the castle in this story. And so they have to go out and find the Wolpertinger, who they have heard has these mystic powers to be able to control healthcare costs. And so they go on this journey to figure out how to do that and have some interesting. They meet some friends, they meet some enemies along the way, and they get tested, of course. And anyways, yes. So yes, volume two will be out later this year. I'll give you a little bit of a heads up on that. So first of all, the first story, I always said it's like Game of Thrones meets The Office and the next generation healthcare. So volume two is The Odyssey meets The Office and Game of Thrones. And so this is, as you can probably guess by the title, it is a sea voyage. So now that they've learned that they can control healthcare costs, now they're going to learn how exactly they go about doing that, and what exactly does that mean, and what are the nuts and bolts of how do you go about actually doing that. And so they're going to have to go on a sea voyage to figure out how to do that.
Now, are you? So I know you're in the midst of it now. It's not released yet, of course. Are you? Did you decide to take it on yourself and become an illustrator, or are you going to outsource and get experts to really the way you've built your whole business anyway? Are you going to have experts collaborate and do all the things you're not an expert at?
Yep, yeah, definitely. So I did not do any of the artwork, none of it. I wrote the story, and then I wrote it. Then basically have to write it as a script, right? And so that's what I did with the first one. And then I found a guy on Fiverr. The plan is to go back to him and have him do the next one, so the artwork is somewhat consistent from volume one to volume two. But yeah, that's what I've done. The other thing I'm going to do once I've completed the script, I've got a few people that have said they're interested in reviewing it, giving me edits and notes and things like that. So I'll certainly go through a couple of rounds of that, and then then reach out and have the artwork done, and throw it on Amazon Kindle and or the self-publishing. That's how I did that last time. That was a pretty simple, straightforward process as well. But do the same thing. And so eventually it'll be available through me directly, or also obviously through Amazon.
Again, I mean, you were able to take what, I wouldn't want to say anybody, but a lot of folks think, and I've heard the expression, salespeople have business cards, experts have books.
Mm.
And I'm no different. I was part of a collaborative book myself. It's here to my left shoulder. I don't know how it appears on video. And it's great. It's been incredible for marketing. Heck, you did it as well. You were part of a book. Again, Next Gen Healthcare. Pick it up on Amazon, or send a message over to Chris. But you decided to, I don't want to say go the other direction, but you decided to have fun with it, right? Where did the idea of the comic book in general happen? And I guarantee, I haven't listened to it in a while, but I'm sure we talked about it on the first episode you were on, episode 49. Check it out. But remind folks, because that is the marquee way, not the comic book, to be creative, to think differently, right? Everybody's writing a book. Chris wrote a book. I wrote a book. That's good. It works. It's helpful. But you took it to a degree that I've never seen anybody do it. And to this day, I still haven't seen anybody take your idea and run with it. And so talk about where that idea came from. And then also talk about if you have any stories of how it's helped you open doors with prospects and clients in ways that you may not have otherwise been able to, had it just been a more, I don't want to say boring, but standard old fashioned boring insurance mumbo jumbo book.
Right, right. Well, I started to, well, so my background, and we may have talked about this in the other podcast, but I guess it's worth repeating. My background was as a journalist, or my degree was in journalism. I never actually did that because I found out that I didn't really want to do that as a profession. I wanted to be a sports writer. And then I had a chance, an internship doing that, and I hated it. But I won't get into that. Anyways, so I took the first job I could get that paid the best and had the best benefits, which was in insurance. And here we are. That's my accidental way of getting in this industry. But I say all that to say that I had a goal when I started GBS, of writing a book, because I knew that was a good marketing thing. I could leverage my background and something, a skill I have, or something I feel like I'm good at, in writing. And so I started to put together an outline of a book, and I was going to write this whole thing about, the way to build a health plan and post ACA and blah, blah, blah. And I had written the outline, right? I vividly remember this. I had an outline. It was, maybe a page long, and I'm thinking, all right, this is going to be great. And I'm looking at this outline and I'm like, oh my gosh, I do not want to write this book. Like I didn't even want to write it. So then I told myself, well, who's going to read it if I don't even want to write this thing, right? So, but during this time, right, it wasn't, it's not like this all comes to you in one, epiphany in one day. But I had been listening to podcasts about self-publishing and about writing books and stuff like that. And so I had all these kind of things that I was pulling from podcasts and other books about self-publishing and these different things. And on one of these podcasts I was listening to, the guy was talking about, he's like, he was talking about how one of his clients, or somebody that he had seen, had taken it was a business book, a serious business book, but that he had used a hero's journey to kind of tell the story, right? He had used this Joseph Campbell, Heroes with a Thousand Faces, like kind of like that arc of a story, and character development and all that, as a way to tell a story about business. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is, first of all, that's super clever, right? Like that's a really brilliant way to do it. So then it was like, okay, I went back and had reviewed some notes, because I read Hero with a Thousand Faces years ago. And so I started to listen to some of Joseph Campbell's lectures and all these kinds of things. And so I decided, okay, this is the way that I want to write a book. And I don't remember exactly how I arrived at wanting to do it as a comic book, but I thought, geez, if I'm going to write a hero's story, and also, if rather than writing a 200 or 250 page book or whatever, all myself, I could write a shorter book and make it a comic book, and give it a different medium, and make it that much more engaging, and kind of tell a story with images as well as the words on the page, right? But I thought that that might be easier for me to do that than trying to tell a story and weave these business lessons into it. And so, like in this first book, and you'll see in the second book as well too, a lot of the narration, so you've got these characters that are talking to each other and things, right? But the narrator is really kind of weaving in the business stuff and how that relates back to what's taking place in the story and how these different characters represent different things, right? Like I mentioned, the Wolpertinger represents myself or anybody who's building modern, next gen kind of health plans. Gwen is the HR director. Gage is the CFO, and so you've
Do
got
they
these
come back in volume 2?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Those two main characters are going to be back, and so is the Wolpertinger. We'll have some new characters, obviously, but you'll have to wait on that. I've already given you too much of a preview. No.
Were you a comic book fan growing up? Did you collect or read comics?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mostly when I was younger, it was Batman, and then later on, it was more kind of Marvel and mostly X-Men. When I was probably, I don't know, fourth or fifth grade, that's when the X-Men were really, that was
Well,
cool,
I've
I
told
guess.
you since I met you, you look like Wolverine.
Yeah, well, I've gone as Wolverine a couple of times for Halloween. I've got the claws and everything. So,
Makes
uh,
total sense. All right,
yeah.
so as we start to wrap up, let's talk about any, and it could be a collaborative effort. It could be the I call it the blue book, the book Next Gen Healthcare. It could be the a combination and or just the comic book. But and you have a big social media presence as well. But can you share any type of story that would help anybody listening to get off the schneid, to do something different, to write a book, to get more active on social, anything that will help them to understand how powerful this marketing can be with respect to prospecting? Like, do you have any set story that comes to mind with how it helped you get an appointment with maybe a group or a client that you had been trying to and struggled with?
Yeah. So, I think you've got to do all of the above, right? Because, you said this very famously, and I know you're repeating Jerry Seinfeld when, the message is in the medium. And I think you have to connect with people in a lot of different ways. I mean, I remember hearing when I had first when I first got into the sales side of the industry, at least anyways, that um, you needed to have 7 conversations or 7 touches or whatever with a prospect before they would buy. And in the age of social media, it's probably triple that. You need to be in front of somebody 21 times before they're going to consider buying from you. That's my guess. I don't, I don't know. But when attention is at such a premium now, you really have to hit them in a number of different ways. And so whether it's through email, social media, books that you're sending, and by the way, I will mail out books to people, and I've got a preset kind of an email cadence that, if you will, that it will go depending on which book it is, but so that they're receiving the book, yes, and they're opening it up, and I think they're, and I'm not there. I rarely do I ever actually just hand it to somebody. Because to me, it's like, it's more important for them to receive something in the mail. They open it up. They're like, they're going through bills. They're going through whatever else hits their desk, right? They're going through the things that they're getting for work in the mail. And suddenly they get somebody who sent them a book or sent them a comic book. Well, that's different. That's unique, right? So it's all about just getting people's attention, and you've got to do it in different ways because you don't know what is going to be that final thing, what is going to finally get their attention, right? So here's something that just happened recently, Eric, is I've had a CFO of a pretty large company that I've been trying to get in front of. And I just had assumed that this guy has no idea who I am, that he has no idea that I even exist, even though, we've connected now on LinkedIn, and he's on my email drip campaign, and I've called him and I've left him messages and all of those kinds of things. Well, I sent him a copy of the comic book, and I always write a little message in there so that they know it's personalized, it's to them. So I write a little message in there and sent it off, and then started my email cadence. And that first email, I get a reply within 24 hours of that email hitting this guy, hitting his inbox. And basically he just says, "Hey, look, I really appreciate you sending this over. I don't really have the time to read this right now, but can we just get on the phone for like 15 minutes? Right? Like, how often do you have prospects reaching out to you and saying, hey, can we get on the phone for 15 minutes? And look, this may not go anywhere, but that created an opportunity that otherwise would not have existed had I not sent the comic book and not had the email cadence and not done all of these things, which, it feels like 98% of what we do is a waste of time, to get to that 2% of when somebody says something like, hey, I'd like to meet with you, right? I want to have a conversation with you. That's really what you need to be able to do. So you really need to do all of the mediums, but start where you think that you're going to be most comfortable. I guess what I would say is start on online, start on social somewhere, because that's the easiest, lowest cost. I mean, Eric was one that really you propelled me to start doing more video and start posting more and things like that. Because if anybody here is friends with me on Instagram or Facebook or any of those other things, I don't really post very much, right? Like, my joke is always like, I post on those channels, on those social networks, when my wife takes a picture and then tags me in it, type of thing, right? That's just how I am. But on LinkedIn, there's something up there every day. And again, it's about having that attention. But then the other thing that you can do on social is you can then take your post and then you can just simply direct message that to somebody that you're trying to get in front of. Another thing that happened recently was I've got a prospect who has a specialty medication issue, a couple specialty medication issues. And so we had an ebook that we put out about specialty meds and stuff like that. And I just decided, all right, I'm going to go ahead and forward this off to this guy. I need a reason to keep in touch with him anyways. And I'm not asking him for another meeting. I'm not asking him for anything. I'm just saying, hey, just thought of you when we put this together and thought you might be interested in it. And then he, messages me back the next day and says, yeah, let's talk about this. I need to have a conversation about this specialty med thing. Right. So again, we were already kind of had an open dialogue, but that helped kind of solidify that. And so whatever you can do to stay in front of people is what you need to do, but you need to touch them a lot more than just 7 times, which was what you were able to do maybe 20 years ago. But that's not going to cut it anymore. You need to be in front of them constantly, delivering value, and then asking for their business, asking for their time, asking for a BOR, asking for a consulting agreement, whatever it is. So
what you described, and you've heard me talk about it before, is you got to be omnipresent, right? And I think it's so powerful. So you're basically and those listening, a lot of you already know this, but most of you frankly aren't doing it. You have to create yourself, and it's going to take months. It's going to take years, but you got to create yourself an online presence, your own personal brand, where when somebody thinks about a certain topic, they know you, they think of you. Like Chris, and we're not going to get into it, but Chris is famous also for on Sundays, every Sunday morning, he'll post Dad Joke Sunday, hashtag Dad Jokes, and he'll post something fun. And it has nothing to do with benefits usually, although I think you did have some times over the years where you found a cool dad joke that had something to do with insurance. But he'll create that on a personal level on a Sunday. It's fun, it's whimsical. On Fridays, he will do a Friday fable. And he's got an arsenal of that. And again, this stuff doesn't exactly, for the most part, have anything to do with insurance or benefits, but he's just staying in front of people and staying top of mind, which I do as well in my own various ways. And I think that's what the key is. And what the books do, right? The Next Gen Healthcare, volume 1 of the comic book, and then now volume 2, as well as the documentary, of course, coming out. And tons of other things. You've been in other magazines, you've had write-ups, you've been awarded many other prestigious honors. All of this culminates into your personal brand, and people get to know you. And let's just face facts, right? People buy from people that they like, know, and trust, people that they respect and they want to hang around with, right? Oftentimes, when you buy an everyday consumer good, let's think of something like a commodity, like a car. You can get a Ford Explorer at any Ford dealer, but oftentimes you pick the one, yeah, the best deal, I get it. But you also are thinking about the person that you want to sit with for a couple hours to do the paperwork and take the test drive in, somebody you can relate to. So, Chris, look, as we start to wrap up, Any parting shots with respect to what's coming up in benefits, what you're seeing, what you're hearing, anything in any predictions you have about the 2024, 25, 26 moving forward in the benefits arena? Anything you'd like to share with the audience before we start to wrap up?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing that has come about in these, certainly in the last few years, and in my recent memory anyways, is the Consolidated Appropriations Act, CAA of 2021. So we've started to see this. Last year was the first year that some of those regulations were really put in place. And I mean, it's something that I think, in my estimation, it looks, first of all, it's the most significant piece of healthcare legislation since the ACA, which was, it's 10 years ago, it was already being implemented. So that's been around. That's been around for a while now. But I think what the CAA does is it really puts the same kind of fiduciary responsibilities and the compliance complexity and the compliance needs, rather, that the retirement plan industry has and has had since, what was it, Pension Protection Act of 2006. So that the CAA, I think, as it is, it's the implementation of it is still very much in its infancy, right? So think ACA 2014. And that's kind of where we're at with that. But I do think that certainly over the rest of this decade, that is going to be the most significant disruption that we'll see in benefits and how they're administered, and who is responsible, and what are they responsible for, right? So like, if you think about, just for a moment, if you think about your a retirement plan and the fiduciary responsibility to, on a regular basis, review the funds that are being offered, review the fees that are being charged, and so on and so forth, that is something that has largely not been done as it relates to health and welfare plans. And look, that's a strong opinion, but I've seen it over the years in working in this, where it's like, well, yeah, well, we like this firm, and it's like, we're just going to renew as is, but there's not really any kind of deeper look than the surface, where again, you think about like an iceberg, right? The iceberg's barely sticking up. You see 10% of it, maybe. The other 90% is all beneath the surface. And that's what I think employers have ignored, when all they do is they look at plan designs, and then they look at what the rates are. They look at what the bottom line is. And that's the most consideration that HR departments, or certainly a lot of HR directors I've seen, have looked at. When it goes much deeper. And now there really is, and we've seen it with this Johnson & Johnson class action suit that's come about. The employees are aware of how expensive these things are. They're aware how unsustainable this is, because they're feeling it as well. And I think we've finally reached this tipping point where employees have had enough. It's totally unsustainable from a cost standpoint and a value standpoint. Which, what are you actually getting for all this money you're spending, right? And that is going to be the most significant thing, I think, for the next few years, or like I say, at least for the rest of this decade, unless, until something new comes along.
Well, Mr. Wolpert, Wolpentinger, producer extraordinaire. I mean, you have so many titles at this point. Top 5 Benefit Pro Advisor of the Year 2024. You've said it all, man. I'm super pumped that you came back on the show. I'm super excited for you. I hope to see you up on stage, receiving the dubious final honor, the #1 Advisor of the Year. But regardless of whatever happens, you got a lot going on, man, and I can only I can't even imagine what you're going to have in the future. I'm super pumped for Volume 2. For those that want to get in touch with Chris, you can go to his website. He's not hard to find, gbsbenefitsgroup.com. He's very, very active on LinkedIn. He loves when you slide into his DM on LinkedIn and try to sell him stuff. He just absolutely adores that. So anybody,
or send me dad jokes. I can't
Yes.
tell you how many times people send me dad jokes, and they do end up getting posted. So just so you're aware.
There you go. And that's fun, and that makes more sense. But I'd rather people just solicit you and try to get you to buy stuff, because you're really good with giving your credit card out. There is an inside joke there. I'm not going to go over in detail, but it was fun for me to say. Anyway, no, with all seriousness, don't harass Chris on LinkedIn. Send him dad jokes, ask him questions, create a collaborative conversation, and he's very willing to help everybody on their journey. Look, as I always say, I just show up and ask some great questions, or what I think are some great questions. I listen, and I don't do anything else. So for the team behind the scenes, on behalf of the Rockstars Rocking podcast, I'm Eric Silverman. That is, was, and always will be the one, the only Chris Wolpert. Check it out. And thanks for listening, everybody. And as I always say, too, don't just have a great day. Make it a great day. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Rockstars Rocking podcast. If you haven't done so already, make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you consume podcasts. And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a review. 5 stars would totally rock. Until next time, Rockstars, keep rocking.